Hi, boys and girls. I hope you're all doing well and enjoying the nice weather outside that's been so sunny and warm. Jumping back into Flora and Ulysses, we have our chart here of characters, and we've seen a lot more of Dad recently. And Dad and Flora, have been, interacting, doing some things, right? It's her time with him. But then Dr. Measham here got connected, and now we kind of have this triangle between Flora, Dad, and Dr. Neesham, right? And so Dr. Measham kind of had a lot of knowledge about Flora, and knew a lot about her when Flora had never met her before. So last time I had said, why don't you think about how is that possible? How would Dr. Measham know so much about Flora, and even though they've never met before? So Flora had brought Ulysses into Dr. Measham's apartment, hoping to get some help because of everything that happened in the restaurant. He was knocked unconscious, and Flora was really nervous and scared about what was going on with him. And so, again, Flora is telling herself not to hope and instead observe. So don't get your hopes up. Don't get too excited about something. Observe your surroundings and be realistic about it. Chapter 39 is called The Tears Roll Off. Dr. Measham came out of the kitchen holding a pink plate with small sandwiches on it. She sat down next to Flora. "You are enjoying the horsehair sofa," she said to Flora. "I guess," said Flora. She wasn't really sure exactly how someone enjoyed a horsehair sofa. You will eat a jelly sandwich," said Dr. Measham. She extended the plate to Flora. Ulysses leaped off Flora's shoulder and into her lap. He sniffed the plate. "Our patient is hungry," said Dr. Measham. "He never had breakfast," said Flora. She took 2 sandwiches and handed one to Ulysses. "This sofa," said Dr. Measham, "is the sofa of my grandmother. She was born on this sofa. She lived the whole of her life there, and in Blundermeachen. She lived the whole of her life there, and she's buried there in the dark wood. But that is a different story. What I meant to say is that when I was a girl, I sat on this sofa and spoke to my grandmother about inconsequential things, well into the gloom of the evening. This is what a girl did in those days. She was expected to speak of things as the gloom of the evening descended. Also, she must knit. Always. The gloom was descending. Always, always, one was knitting outfits for the little trolls." "What little trolls?" said Flora. "And where is Blundermeachen?" "Never mind about the trolls for now. I meant only to say that life was very gloomy then, and one was always knitting." "It sounds lousy," said Flora. "It was exactly this, lousy," said Dr. Measham. She smiled. Her dentures were very bright. There was a smear of grape jelly on one of her fake incisors. Flora reached for another sandwich. Had terrible things can happen to you ever warned against eating a jelly sandwich in the house of a woman from Blundermeachen? Her father is a lonely man. Also very sad. To leave you, this broke his heart." "It did?" said Flora. Yes, Mr. George Buckman had sat on this horsehair sofa many times. He has talked of his sadness. He has wept. This sofa has seen the tears of many people. It is the sofa that is good for tears. They roll right off, you see." Her father had sat on this couch and wept as the gloom of the evening descended. Flora suddenly felt like she might cry too. What was wrong with her? Seal blubber, she thought. The words steadied her. She handed another sandwich to Ulysses. Your father has a very big heart," said Dr. Measham. "It means the heart of George Buckman is large. It is capable of containing much joy and much sorrow." For some reason, she heard William Spiver's voice saying that the universe was a random place. "Random universe," said William Spiver. "Capacious, random, heart, universe." Flora felt dizzy. "I'm a cynic," she announced for no particular reason, and in too loud a voice. "Bah, cynics," said Dr. Measham. "Cynics are people who are afraid to believe." She waved her hand in front of her face as if she were brushing away a fly. Do you believe in things? Said Flora. Yes, yes, I believe, said Dr. Measham. She smiled her too bright smile again. You have heard of Pascal's wager? No, said Flora. Pascal, said Dr. Measham, had it that since it could not be proven whether God existed, one might as well believe that he did, because there was everything to gain by believing and nothing to lose. This is how it is for me. What do I lose if I choose to believe? Nothing. Take this squirrel, for instance, Ulysses. Do I believe he can type poetry? Sure, I do believe it. There is much more beauty in the world if I believe that such a thing like this is possible. Flora and Dr. Measham looked at Ulysses. He was holding half a sandwich in his front paws. There were blobs of grape jelly in his whiskers. Do you know what a superhero is? Said Flora. Sure, I know what a superhero is. Ulysses is a superhero, said Flora, but he hasn't really done anything heroic yet. Mostly, he's just flown around. He's lifted a vacuum cleaner over his head. He's wrote some poetry. He hasn't saved anyone, though, and that's what superheroes are supposed to do, save people. Who knows what he'll do, said Dr. Measham. Who knows whom he will save? So many miracles have not yet happened. Flora watched as one of the jelly blobs on Ulysses' whiskers trembled and fell in slow motion to the horsehair sofa. All things are possible, said Dr. Measham. When I was a girl, the miraculous happened every day, or every other day, every third day, actually. Actually, sometimes it did not happen at all, even on the third day. But still, we expected it. You see what I'm saying? Even when it didn't happen, we were expecting it. We knew the miraculous would come. There was a knock at the door. See, said Dr. Measham, this will be your father, Mr. George Buckman. Flora stood and went to the door and opened it. It was her father, and he was smiling. Again. Which did seem kind of miraculous. Hey, Pop, she said. You see, said Dr. Measham, he smiles. Flora's father's smile got bigger. He took off his hat. He bowed. George Buckman, he said, how do you do? Flora couldn't help it. She smiled, too. She was still smiling when a noise that sounded like the end of the world echoed through the hallway of the Blixton Arms. 1 minute her father was standing there with his hat on in his hands, smiling, and the next minute Mr. Klaus the cat came out of nowhere and landed right on top of George Buckman's unprotected head. Chapter 40, Vanquished. Fortunately, a superhero was present. Sunny side up. For the love of Pete, holy bagumba, vanquished, and the superhero was inordinately pleased with himself. He felt immensely powerful. He felt like writing a poem. So take a look at those pictures and what happened when the cat landed on his head. Who saved Dad? Chapter 41, I Promise. They were in the car. Flora's father's hands were on the steering wheel at 10 o'clock and 2. Flora was sitting up front, and Ulysses' head was out the window. They were heading back to Flora's mother's house in spite of Flora's protestations. We have to go back, said her father. We have to return at the regular Saturday afternoon time. We have to act normal, natural, unconcerned. So it says that they were headed back to Flora's mother's house in spite of Flora's protestations. What's a protest? If Flora's protesting going back to her mom's house, what is she doing? Flora wanted to object, but she could read the writing on the wall, or rather, she could read the words that hovered above her and her father and the squirrel. Destiny could no longer be forestalled. The arch nemesis must be faced. Holy bagumba, said her father. His right ear was wrapped in a huge amount of gauze. His head looked lopsided. Wholly unanticipated occurrences. A squirrel vanquished a cat. He shook his head. He smiled. And now it's time for another battle, said Flora. Everything will be fine, said her father. So you say, said Flora. It started to rain. Ulysses pulled his head back inside the car. He looked up at Flora, and the sight of his little whiskered face calmed her somehow. She smiled at him, and the squirrel sighed happily and curled up in her lap. When I was a girl in Blundermeeshan, Dr. Measham had said to Flora when they were all leaving the apartment 267. We wondered always if we would see each other again. Each day was uncertain. So to say goodbye to someone was uncertain too. Would you see them again? Who could say? It was a place of dark secrets, unmarked graves, terrible curses. Trolls were everywhere. So we said goodbye to each other the best way we could. We said, I promise to always turn back toward you. I say those words to you now, Flora Belle. I promise to always turn back toward you. And now you must say them to me. I promise to always turn back toward you, Flora had said. She whispered the words again now to the squirrel. I promise to always turn back towards you. She put a finger on Ulysses' chest. His tiny heart was beating out a message that felt like I promise, I promise, I promise. Hearts were the strangest things. Pop, said Flora. Yes, said her father. Can I feel your heart? My heart, said her father. Okay, sure. And then for the first time ever, George Buckman took both of his hands off the steering wheel while the car was in motion. He opened his arms wide. Flora gently moved Ulysses out of her lap and onto the seat beside her, and then she reached up and across and put her hand on the left side of her father's chest. And she felt it. Her father's heart beating there inside of him. It felt very certain, very strong, and very large, just like Dr. Measham had said. Thank you, she told him. Sure, he said, you bet. He put his hands back on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, and then the three of them, Flora, her father, and the squirrel, traveled the rest of the way home in a strange and peaceful silence. The only noise was from the windshield wipers. They hummed back and forth, singing a sweet, out-of-tune song. The squirrel slept, and Flora Belle Buckman was happy. So Flora is feeling happy, but as a cynic, she's always negative. So do we think she's staying a cynic, or are things changing and maybe she's seeing the more positive? Maybe she's becoming more of an optimist. Chapter 42, Foreboding. Her father pulled the car into the driveway and cut the engine. The windshield wipers let out a surprised squeak and then froze in mid-wave. The rain slowed to a trickle, the sun came out from behind a cloud and then disappeared again, and the smell of ketchup melded with butterscotch rose with a gentle persistence from the seats of the car. Here we are, said her father. Yep, said Flora, here we are. 412 Belgrade Avenue. It was the house that Flora had lived in for the whole of her life. But something was different about it. Something had changed. What was it? Ulysses crawled up onto her shoulder. She put her hand on him. The house looked sneaky somehow, almost as if it were up to no good. Foreboding. That was the word that popped into Flora's head. The house seemed full of foreboding. So what do you think that means? The house seemed full of foreboding. Do inanimate objects, so that means couches, chairs, spatulas, shoes, clothes, absorb the energy of the criminals, the wrongdoers among whom they live? The criminal element had queried in a recent issue. It isn't, of course, entirely unscientific to assume such a thing. But still, we are forced to admit that this woeful world, there exist objects with an almost palpable energy of menace. Spatulas that seem cursed, couches that contain literal and metaphorical stains of the past, houses that seem to perpetually groan and moan from the sins contained in their environs. Can we explain this? No. Do we understand this? No. Do we know that criminals exist? We do. We are also terribly and unfortunately certain that the criminal element will be forever among us. And the arch nemesis, thought Flora, the arch nemesis will be forever among us too. Ulysses' arch nemesis is in that house right now. Do you remember the darkness of 10,000 hands? Flora said to her father. Yep, said her father. He wields 10,000 hands of anger, greed, and revenge. He is the sworn enemy of Incandesto. He's Incandesto's arch nemesis, said Flora. Right, said her father. I tell you what, the darkness of 10,000 hands better stay away from our squirrel. Who are they talking about right now? In this case, the darkness of 10,000 hands is who? When the dad says the darkness of 10,000 hands better stay away from our squirrel. Who are they talking about? He honked the horn. Home the warrior, he shouted. Home the conquering superhero squirrel. Ulysses puffed out his chest. Let's go, Flora said. We have to do it. We have to face the arch nemesis. Right, said her father. Bravely forward. And he honked the horn again. All right, so Flora's father was given very specific instructions by the mother to do what with Ulysses while they were gone? To get rid of him, right? Did the father do what he was asked? Well, the answer is no, because currently he is bringing Flora home, and Flora still has Ulysses. And Flora, not only is he bringing Flora home, Flora's bringing Ulysses into the house with her. So, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think will be the outcome of Flora and Ulysses being in that house together? And how might Flora's mother react to this whole situation when she realizes it? Do you think it's going to be a good interaction, or is her mom going to probably be upset and it's going to be a really bad interaction between them? So, what do you think is going to happen? Make some predictions about what you think will happen in the next section, and I will see you next time for the next part.